Lo lograré, saldré de esta, lo lograré, lo lograré.
Well, how are you? This is Catalina with Granvia, and I wanted to go ahead and take a minute to talk to you guys about resources that we use for newcomers. And so we have 1.2 million plus English learners here in the state of Texas today, and we now have more English learners than any other state. So we are looking at having the highest concentration of English learners in the country. And with this, we have gained a lot of knowledge and experience around how to serve these communities in various areas. So I wanted to go ahead and discuss a little bit about this with you guys. I wanted to discuss this with you because it is an area near and dear to me, right? And a lot of people get lost here in this topic, and they need a little bit of direction, understandably so. So let's go ahead and get started. What I'm going to do is I'm probably going to break this down into a few bite-sized pieces, but there will more than likely be a long version and then shorter versions available. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so that's not going to work. All right, so with that, we're going to go ahead and take a look at a few critical pieces. And we'll talk a little bit about support. So first of all, I guess to even discuss supports, it is policy that we support our English learners in comprehensibility and understanding. There were several court cases and legislation, and even in the Constitution and the 14th Amendment, where it says life, liberty, and pursuit of property. Education is the property that children possess, and it is with education that they will acquire property as adults. So in the past, the Supreme Court has always voted in favor of comprehensibility and understanding as a form of property that students possess, right? Because young people don't really possess any property. We can't really say it's their video games. We can't really say it's their clothing. We can't really say it's their backpack. They belong to them, but they can all be taken away from them too. But their constitutional property, and I would say human right, is access to education. Therefore, all of the following accommodations that we make for our English learners are all constitutional rights. So I wanted to go ahead and get that out of the way. We have several cases that make reference to that. If anybody out there wants to look them up, Plyler versus Joe is one, Lau versus Nichols, Meyer versus Nebraska, and there's several others, Rios versus Reed, and we have like Centron versus Brentwood. So those are just a few out there, but there are more, I'm sure, that you'll discover along the way if it is you choose to look further into the topic. Anyway, so coming back in, so we have already stated that linguistic supports our policy, and that's just the way we do things in education when we really want to serve and educate people equitably without playing favorites and giving everyone a fair playing field. So we have the use of AI, which we'll go into, sheltered instruction, which is also critical. In reading, we might look at level text, we might look at adapted text, and then we look at native language supports. With all of this, I would like to go ahead and add that cultural responsiveness is a piece that is embedded into all of this. And so I just kind of I did that with the use of the blanket, but you know what? I'm going to go ahead and add a piece here. Now I'm going to insert a little word art here, and it's going to say cultural responsive instruction, culturally responsive. So this is going to need to be in everything. And why does it matter so much? Well, and I'm gonna put it here at the bottom just so you can see that it's there. But it matters because our learners, there it is, right? Students feel engaged, represented, they're when they see themselves in the curriculum. And I think about it not as doing anything extraneous. I think about it as very democratic. Like we have no taxation without representation. So why would we have that? Because if we're going to be taxed, or for children, if they're going to be going to school, then they need to be represented in the texts. And that's that no taxation without representation. Nobody would second guess that for an adult, but for a child, we second guess it all the time, right? People are like, why do I have to do this? Because because self-representation is a thing, and it is very democratic. It is, in fact, one of the foundational principles of the United States is no taxation without representation. And self-representation is there. So yes, supports are there, and cultural responsiveness and students being embedded in the curriculum, be it through texts like those behind me. I have several texts ahead of me, behind me, all around me. I have books all around me. But there's several books that you're looking at that are like culturally responsive texts. They could be across all genres, right? This is science for fourth grade. We even teach American history, US history in Spanish through comics. Here's another one that is culturally responsive called In My Family. This is the bilingual text, In Mi Familia. So there's so many ways to embed cultural responsiveness into instruction. Okay, so getting back into that needs to be like always in the background of our mind, right? As we think about our newcomers, is this culturally responsive instruction piece. Why? Because they find themselves in a country where they don't know the language, they don't know the school system, they don't know how things work, and so they get lost. And so they feel lost. And by creating a culturally responsive environment where they're able to see themselves in the surroundings, they're able to learn because their anxiety, their affective filter goes down because they feel represented, they feel embraced, they feel well received in this place that seems familiar to them now, and that is your classroom. So we're going to go ahead and keep going and talk a little bit about AI. So AI has so many options, and I'm going to go ahead and pull up Chat GPT. And I know there's so many other artificial intelligence, right, that are out there and supports. I get it. I've used a few of them, but I'm not fluent in all of them. And not that I'm terribly fluent in this either, but I am more fluent in Chat GPT than I am in any other AI provider. I know that there's Google Gemini, and I have every intention in the world to be using that soon. But I am not there yet. All right, so we're going to go ahead and take a look at AI. And so basically what you can do is, like they say, it says ask anything as a prompt. And there's a lot of things you can do with AI. You have, I think, don't quote me, I think you have 10 free, maybe 20 free GPTs. a month, but then uh, those prompts. But then if you have like a paid version, you can get access to more. So, sometimes I will do the paid version. I really can't tell you in all honesty whether or not I have it right now, but I'm not using, I'm doing some writing outside of this. And so I'm not using it for the writing piece. So I'm happy to be using it here to demonstrate this to you today. So let's say that you have a newcomer and the first thing you ask them is about themselves, because this is really a great place to start, is to begin by asking them about themselves and what are their interests and how can you incorporate some of those interests in class, and so they feel seen, they feel represented, they feel heard, they feel like somebody cares. So that's all really good stuff. So let's pretend that they say they really like um, Japanese anime, right? So you're doing a story, or maybe that week you're doing a lesson on summary. So you say, okay, you really like Japanese anime. Okay, so maybe you can go. So whatever this person is interested in, you can write it up. And so let's say you say, write a story in about 300 words. And I like to give it specific numbers of words. Over Japanese anime. Okay, so write a story in 300 words over Japanese anime at a third grade level. So then it should generate a story at a third grade level in 300 words, and that story will be about Japanese anime. So it's working on it, right? Emma loved to watch cartoons, but one day her brother showed her something new, Japanese anime. So you could always, characters have big shiny eyes, and so it's just about Japanese anime, right? And that could be done. And so let's say that's at a third grade level, but then you learn that it is perfectly within policy and supported by policy to provide native language supports for, let's say, Emma. Emma came up in ChatGPT. So I'm going to call this newcomer Emma, to give Emma native language supports, because it's going to take 5 to 7 years. Those of you that know language, the science of language acquisition, it takes 5 to 7 years. The sweet spot is about 6 years for students to become academically adept at English. So in the meantime, we have to be learning reading, and we have to be learning the story elements of reading, and we have to be learning all of our teaks in the meantime while we are learning English. There's really no speeding up that process. What there is you can give them tons of English without any native language supports, because let's say you, the educator, may not know much about how second language acquisition looks. And then also the need for students to gain comprehensible input and understanding. So let's say that you're afraid of giving any native language supports. Well, what that's going to do is it doesn't speed up the clock. It's still going to be 6 years before that child is able to perform at native language or near native language capacity in English. Okay. So you're not speeding up the clock by giving them more English. What you're doing is you're denying them access to understanding of the content, because they're thinking and learning in Spanish when they first come. And so if you are only giving them English, then they're not understanding what you're saying. And so they're not understanding multiplication, they're not understanding science, they're not understanding reading. So the only way that they're really going to understand it is through the use of native language supports. So here we have a story that was written for the magic of Japanese anime, right? Because we learned that Emma loves Japanese anime. And let's say she's, at a 4th or 5th grade level, and you went ahead and you really should, and I'm going to say this, you really should have the students read to you when they first come to you, because it is critical that you get some sort of understanding of their literacy. If they don't have literacy, then we're going to need to build literacy. But I actually have already done videos on that. So that's on my YouTube channel too. How do you build literacy? But let's say that she does read in Spanish, and you can always find like something on Google, just a little sentence in Spanish, a little book in Spanish, and ask her to read, a paragraph or two, and you'll figure out whether or not she can read in Spanish. If they can read in Spanish, then perfect. They're going to be able to transfer all of those skills into English. It's not going to be a perfect fit, but it's going to be a mostly perfect fit. The way I like saying it is, let's say you're wearing your best friend's shoes that was the same size, and you're walking around in their shoes. They fit, but they don't fit. That's exactly what it's like when you bring the literacy skills from one language into another. It's a fit, but not perfect fit. So anyway, that takes time and it takes some massaging. But if we are teaching reading and we've already given her, like, look, we've already created a story based on their interest, and let's say I really want her to understand the story and she doesn't understand any of it, I'm going to go ahead and ask ChatGPT to please rewrite the story, right, in Spanish. Now write the story in Spanish, right? And now it's going to give you that same story that it wrote about Japanese anime, written at the 3rd grade level. It's going to give that to you in Spanish. La magia del anime. Japonés. So it's writing it out. It takes a little bit of time for it to generate. So what it's done here is it now has the story about Japanese anime, right? She watched about a boy with a magical notebook, keeps drawing on her own from that day on, right? And then it has encantaba ver caricaturas, primer año que vio, un niño que encontró un cuaderno mágico, decidió dibujar, y luego desde ese día. So this is like, it's the same text, so I checked it. So what you can do, now you have an English text and a Spanish text, and they say the same thing, right? And it's written over something that they absolutely love. So you can copy this, right? And you can paste it into a Google Doc. Or you can paste it into Microsoft Word, however you want to do it, right? And so let's say I'm taking it into a Google Doc, and then I'm going to paste it here. And I have to make sure that you guys can still see this, because I'm not sure you are able to even see it. All right, so here we have. So what we can do then is create a side-by-side, which I'm a big fan of side-by-sides, because it helps the student start making those cross-linguistic connections immediately. You definitely want to provide the information to them in Spanish, because that's the language that they learn in, and that's the language that they understand in, right? But you also want, just in case, I would not assess them over this in English, because if you're assessing them in English, that's not fair because they don't speak English. But if they want to be not dilly-dallying, but if they want to be building their their language and cross-linguistic connections from the start, then I think it's great. All right, so we have now a side-by-side. Of course, you print it out. Page 1 is going to be the English text, and page 2 is the Spanish text, but it's the same text. And of course, you can go in if you've lost any integrity to the document and how it looks. Let me go in and kind of do some. Right, so now you have that side by side. You can print it out, and she can read it in English and she can read it in Spanish. I would definitely go back in and make sure that those vocabulary words are exactly like they were on the ChatGPT. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and just recopy and paste it. Somehow I lost a formatting integrity. So let's see if we can do that. Yeah, looks like we lost it. But you can always go back in, unbold it, and just highlight those words that need to be highlighted. Anyway, so that is your book, and that is your native language supports over something that Emma absolutely loves, which is anime, right? And she can understand it, and she's able to read it, and then she can do a summary on it, right? And so you can talk about it. Now you can always translate your notes. You can also do something that's really cool if you do present class with through PowerPoint. Let me go ahead and go to PowerPoint. And let me go ahead and put it in present mode for you. And so on the present mode, let's stop that screen. On the present mode, you can go into okay. Once you hit present on this, I'm not sure that I've already set it up, but if I haven't, it's a good time for me to try. I'm sure you can see this, right? So if you go to the 3 dots at the bottom and you open it up and you hit subtitles, and we can do below slide. Well, we can do it at top. Let's do it at top. And then let's do those settings. Again, subtitle settings, more settings at the bottom. And now we're going to subtitle in Spanish. So you can actually set up those subtitles in Spanish. And so now I'm given the class, and it should be automatically populating here. Let's see. I don't understand why it's not giving me those subtitles. Usually it's really good about doing that. Okay, testing, testing, 1, 2, 3, testing, testing. Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. So let's go ahead and escape from there. And let's try presenting again. Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. And it could be, I'm thinking it could be that my mic is currently being used by the recording device that I have. And so it's not giving me the ability to use it on both apps at the same time. Imagine that. But anyway, so that's another thing you can do for your newcomers is to put up the prompts, because it will generate subtitles in whatever the target language is that you set it to on your settings. All right, so we've discussed a little bit about AI, and that is touched on AI, of course. I mean, you can go, obviously, you can write about any topic. You can have that story generated at any grade level, You can choose how many words you want that to be. You can even do a little bit, and I'll show you a little bit about bridging on that. So let me go in and stop screen here. Stop sharing that. And let's go into like how it can help us bridge. Now, bridging is really good in terms of helping the students develop their academic vocabulary in both languages. Because remember, I mean, they're not going to know biology terms in Spanish because they haven't done ninth grade yet. They're still young people. They're little people, and they're experiencing the whole talk about biology the first time in your classroom. So yes, you're going to be teaching those words in the first time, and they're going to be hearing it in English, but they understand them in Spanish. Even though they're still learning the concepts, it makes a lot more sense to them in their language. So let's go ahead and talk about what bridging would look like in terms of ChatGPT, right? So let's go ahead and share screen, and we're going to go back to that ChatGPT tab. And now we're going to say, using the following words, generate a Spanish translation, right? And let's say translation. And let's say we use the word cycle, patterns, climate, weather, precipitation, and humidity. Okay, so now you're going, and those are the words that you're studying that week. So ChatGPT will translate those words, and now that child can write them into their unit vocabulary inside of their composition book, and they're able to refer, to the unit vocabulary of that page, and it can be about, cycle, ciclo, patterns, patrones, climate, clima, weather, tiempo, or clima, depending on the context, right? Precipitation, precipitación, humidity, and humedad. So they can write that in terms of like their unit vocabulary in their composition book. So that is also a way to demonstrate to your observers, those of you that are still being t-test and that you're being observed by your staff and school leadership, a way to show that you're doing differentiation for students that are English learners. And so when you're creating bridges for the vocabulary, let me go ahead and make that a little bigger. When you're creating bridges, and I'll lower the prompt so you can see the prompts. When you're creating bridges, you are also helping the students see, okay, we can talk about cognates. Look at cycle and ciclo. Those are very similar. And then patterns of patrón, those are also similar. So you can begin a discussion around cognates. And let's say your whole class doesn't need a discussion on cognates. Or maybe you need a little refresher. What are cognates, right? Cognates are words that share basically the same roots. Sometimes they're identical, like similar and similar, but sometimes they are just off by just a few letters, like cycle and ciclo. So cognates are what people in the bilingual world call cross-linguistic connections. And they are, because they are connections between both languages. They're where both languages converge. And so we have a really high convergence rate between English and Spanish. It's over 80%, somewhere between 82 and 85%. And so that is really critical when it comes to reaching the newcomers, is really helping them understand precipitation. How are the words the same and how are they different? Because they need support in training their minds and understanding patterns in these languages so they can help them understand words that they don't know yet. All right, so ChatGPT is very helpful. And I'm only going to talk about those two things right now because I do feel like we need to move on with a couple of other topics. But certainly when it comes to bridging your language, when it comes to creating text it is very helpful when it comes to AI. And AI is to me, it is has been a very resourceful tool, and I get a lot of bang for my buck in terms of just getting quality information out of AI. So we're going to go ahead and stop sharing there and go back to the original slide. So we're at sheltered instruction. We have level text, adaptive text, and native language supports. So I will be looking forward to covering those in the next video. But now we have discussed AI. We even made a little bit of reference to level text because you can pick level text for them. And we showed you that, there are different levels of text and you can pick the languages too. What I would certainly do is not push an English only approach because that's going to make them feel absolutely isolated and unable to learn the content. It's going to create distance and coerciveness in the classroom and between them and their school experience. So you want to embrace, elevate, build on what they already know. And so when it comes to text, if you have a library there close to you, I would certainly encourage them checking out a book in Spanish and checking out a book in English. That way they can get exposed to both languages in a social way where they have choice, because choice is one of the biggest ways we can create lifelong learners. So that's a critical piece. Level text, what's the difference? We'll go over it one, and actually I have a video on it already. But level texts are books that are written at different levels. So you may have we typically use to go into like the science of teaching reading, we typically use like an A to Z level. And that's one way to do it. But you can also look at the, you can see a book by its level. This is like a chapter book. So this is going to obviously be 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th. It's probably not going to be a 3rd grade book, but it could be if I have a high reader. But you also have, just by looking at them, you can tell what grade level that they're good for. You can tell by the spacing. See, this one fools you because you look at it and it's, it looks pretty low level, but you open it up and the text is tightly packed on that page. And of course, it's written in both languages. Big, huge win when it comes to students understanding the text, and they only have one of those languages. They can help develop the other. But yeah, the level texts are really critical and very useful when you want to meet the needs of the students that come to us at different literacy level. Adapted text is pretty much what I wrote. So an adapted text means it's the same content that you're already teaching, but written at a 2nd grade level, or written at a 6th grade level, or written at, an 11th grade level. So it's like those same contents, but written at different levels, but they're covering the same lesson. So that is adapted. Then you have the native language supports, which is really also what we talked about there, which is really including in text and literature and bridging and all of the instructional supports in Spanish to make your lesson more understandable for the newcomer. So one thing on the side that I'd love to encourage you to consider, and that would be consider accepting work for them during this first year, certainly the first year, because we know it takes about 6 years to get that information. But certainly in the first year, giving them the opportunity to answer you in Spanish, because you're giving those supports to them. So they're going to understand it in Spanish. They're going to have those resources. They're going to actually probably go deeper into them if you have videos. That's another way too. Your video supports can be the closed captions, especially on YouTube, can be done in Spanish. So they can watch the same video, but they can have closed captions in Spanish, the subtitles. And So if you're going to create all of those supports, then allow them to answer in Spanish, right? Like if they're going to be processing inside of their composition journal and they're going to be writing up a response to whatever they learned that day in class, right? Then go ahead and give them the opportunity to respond in Spanish or on Google Doc, respond in Spanish. And then you or them can translate that to English. They can, again, have that side by side and they can respond to Spanish, but also give you the support of linguistically translanguaging that back to English so that you can understand what was said. So, anyway, there is a lot to say about native language supports because, yes, will they be learning English? They will be learning English, but they will also be learning content. And remember, if you do the all English, they're not going to learn any faster. They're just going to miss out on a whole lot of critical content. And we don't want that because they're only going to be in sixth grade once in their life. And we want to be sure that they walk out of whatever grade they're in with the teaks necessary to be successful in the next grade. Well, thank you so much for your time and have a great year, right? Good luck with those newcomers. We're here to support you. You can find us at www.grandviapro.com. Let's see if I can get my get a little banner set up, but Grandvia does provide services on site when it comes to training and working with teachers. So we are happy to do that and work with your teachers there on site. We're also happy to put together trainings that are virtual, and maybe you want to get together with another campus and get all of the teachers to come in at a certain time, because we can do this in about really just looking at AI, we can do this in about an hour. And just like we did, we made reference to other aspects. We didn't go deep into shelter instruction. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back and do another video on sheltered instruction. But I bet with a good hour, hour and a half, we can hit any one of these components strongly. And so we are open to negotiating and working with you guys however you guys see fit. And as a small business, we're able to do that, meet your needs during clock hours or after clock hours. And of course, we're here anytime. So I'm Catalina, and it has been a pleasure working with you. I look forward to hearing from you soon in our next video.